Episode 124.
An interview?
Repeated Umbridge, her voice thinner and higher than ever.
What do you mean?
I mean, a reporter asked me questions and I answered them, said Harry. Here. And he threw the copy of the Quibbler at her. She caught it and stared down at the cover. Her pale, doughy face turned an ugly, patchy violet.
When did you do this?
She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Last Hogsmeade weekend, said Harry. She looked up at him, incandescent with rage, the magazine shaking in her stubby fingers.
There will be no more Hogsmeade trips for you, Mr. Potter, she whispered. How you dare! How you could!
She took a deep breath.
I have tried again and again to teach you not to tell lies. The message, apparently, has still not sunk in. 50 points from Gryffindor, and another week's worth of detentions.
She stalked away, clutching the Quibbler to her chest, the eyes of many students following her. By mid-morning, enormous signs had been put up all over the school, not just on house notice boards, but in the corridors or in classrooms, too.
By order of the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, any student found in possession of the magazine The Quibbler will be expelled. The above is in accordance with Educational Decree Number 27, signed Dolores Jane Umbridge, High Inquisitor.
For some reason, every time Hermione caught sight of one of these signs, she beamed with pleasure. What exactly are you so happy about? Harry asked her.
Oh, Harry, don't you see? Hermione breathed. If she could have done one thing to make absolutely sure that every single person in this school will read your interview, it was banning it.
And it seemed that Hermione was quite right. By the end of that day, though Harry had not seen so much as a corner of the Quibbler anywhere in the school, the whole place seemed to be quoting the interview at each other. Harry heard them whispering about it as they queued up outside classes, discussing it over lunch and in the back of lessons, while Hermione even reported that every occupant of the cubicle in the girls' toilets had been talking about it when she nipped in there after ancient runes.
And then they spotted me, and obviously they know I know you, so they were bombarding me with questions, Hermione told Harry, her eyes shining. And Harry, I think they believed you. I really do. I think you finally got them convinced.
Meanwhile, Professor Umbridge was stalking the school, stopping students at random and demanding that they turn out their books and pockets. Harry knew she was looking for copies of the Quibbler, but the students were several steps ahead of her. The pages carrying Harry's interview had been bewitched to resemble extracts from textbooks if anyone but themselves read it, or else wiped magically blank until they wanted to peruse it again. Soon it seemed that every single person in the school had read it. The teachers were, of course, forbidden from mentioning the interview by Educational Decree Number 26, but they found ways to express their feelings about it all the same. Professor Sprout awarded Gryffindor 20 points when Harry passed her a watering can. A beaming Professor Flitwick pressed a box of squeaking sugar mice on him at the end of charms, said, "Shh," and hurried away. And Professor Trelawney broke into hysterical sobs during divination and announced to the startled class and a very disapproving Umbridge that Harry was not going to suffer an early death after all, but would live to a ripe old age, become Minister of Magic, and have 12 children. But what made Harry happiest was Cho catching up with him as he was hurrying along to Transfiguration the next day. Before he knew what had happened, her hand was in his, and she was breathing in his ear.
I'm really, really sorry. That interview was so brave. It made me cry.
He was sorry to hear she had shed even more tears over it, but very glad they were on speaking terms again, and even more pleased when she gave him a swift kiss on the cheek and hurried off again. And, unbelievably, no sooner had he arrived outside Transfiguration than something just as good happened. Seamus stepped out of the queue to face him.
"I just wanted to say,"
he mumbled, squinting at Harry's left knee, "I believe you. I've sent a copy of that magazine to me man." If anything more was needed to complete Harry's happiness, it was Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's reactions. He saw them with their heads together later that afternoon in the library, together with a weedy-looking boy Hermione whispered was called Theodore Nott. They looked around at Harry as he browsed the shelves for the book he needed on partial vanishment, and Goyle cracked his knuckles threateningly, and Malfoy whispered something undoubtedly malevolent to Crabbe. Harry knew perfectly well why they were acting like this. He had named all of their fathers as Death Eaters.
"And the best bit is,"
whispered Hermione gleefully as they left the library,
"they can't contradict you because they can't admit they've read the article."
to cap it all, Luna told him over dinner that no copy of the Quibbler had ever sold out faster. "Dad's reprinting," she told Harry, her eyes popping excitedly. "He can't believe it. He says people seem even more interested in this than the Crumplehorn Snorkags." Harry was a hero in the Gryffindor common room that night. Daringly, Fred and George had put an engorgement charm on the front cover of the Quibbler and hung it on the wall, so that Harry's giant head gazed down upon the proceedings, occasionally saying things like, "The Ministry are morons," and "Eat dung, Umbridge," in a booming voice. Hermione did not find this very amusing. She said it interfered with her concentration and ended up going to bed early out of irritation. Harry had to admit that the poster was not quite as funny after an hour or two, especially when the talking spell had started to wear off, so that it merely shouted disconnected words like dung and Umbridge at more and more frequent intervals in a progressively higher voice. In fact, it started to make his head ache, and his scar began prickling uncomfortably again. To disappointed moans from the many people who were sitting around him, asking him to relive his interview for the umpteenth time, he announced that he too needed an early night. The dormitory was empty when he reached it. He rested his forehead for a moment against the cool glass of the window beside his bed. It felt soothing against his scar. Then he undressed and got into bed, wishing his headache would go away. He also felt slightly sick. He rolled over onto his side, closed his eyes, and fell asleep almost at once. He was standing in a dark, curtained room lit by a single branch of candles. His hands were clenched on the back of a chair in front of him. They were long-fingered and white, as though they had not seen sunlight for years, and looked like large, pale spiders against the dark velvet of the chair. Beyond the chair, in a pool of light cast upon the floor by the candles, knelt a man in black robes.
"I have been badly advised, it seems,"
said Harry in a high, cold voice that pulsed with anger.
"Master, I crave your pardon,"
croaked the man kneeling on the floor. The back of his head glimmered in the candlelight. He seemed to be trembling.
"I do not blame you, Rookwood,"
said Harry in that cold, cruel voice. He relinquished his grip upon the chair and walked around it, closer to the man cowering upon the floor, until he stood directly over him in the darkness, looking down from a far greater height than usual.
"You are sure of your facts, Rookwood?" asked Harry.
"Yes, my lord, yes. I used to work in the department after all."
"Avery told me Bodhi would be able to remove it."
"Bodhi could never have taken it, master. Bodhi would have known he could not. Undoubtedly that is why he fought so hard against Malfoy's imperious curse.